there. Have you ever wondered what exactly you need to do to try and get a handle on your bird's feather plucking? Well, if so, then stick around because this video is for you. So there was this recent article in the Association of Avian Vets, like just this week that I saw published by Dr. Lauren Thielen, I believe her name is. And her article is called A Clinical Approach to Feather Destructive Behavior. And as you probably know, feather destructive behavior is more of a fancy name for feather plucking. And so I wanted to break that article down for you and help you understand what are 5 things that you can do if you've got a bird that's feather plucking, or you want to just simply prevent your pet bird from developing that terrible habit in the first place. So I'm going to talk about 5 different things that you can do in order to support your bird. Now, if you haven't visited my channel before and you're new to the channel, my name's Diane Burrows. I'm the founder and CEO of birdsupplies.com, which is a website that's dedicated to everything parrot wellness. And so my company actually manufactures a range of pet supplements that you see behind me, as well as bird collars for birds that feather pluck. And I've got an extensive, rich blog post about, just everything that you can do to help support your bird and help it be as healthy and happy as possible. So getting back to this article, I want to tell you what I'm going to talk about, these 5 different remedies. So the first one is to provide a healthy diet and or functional supplements. The second thing that you can do is to address common behavior problems. The third thing that you can start doing is to address common environmental problems. Fourth thing that she talks about in this Association of Avian Veterinarians is to reduce reproductive behaviors. And everybody knows that parrots can get quite hormonal. And then the 5th thing that she talks about is the importance of providing UVA, UVB lighting. So as you know, feather plucking is a common issue with pet birds, and it can be kind of difficult to treat. I mean, you hear a lot about people, they've rescued a bird or what have you, and the bird's been potentially plucking for a very long time, and these people have just tried everything they can think of. But fortunately, there is a lot of more up-and-coming research taking place so that we know what exactly people can do to both prevent a plucking problem and to treat it or resolve it once it's started. So let's talk about that. Now, first of all, let me introduce you to some different concepts. Now, African gray parrots and cockatoos are some of the most prolific birds that develop feather plucking issues. But it's very common in other species too. We see it a lot with eclectus. I hear about it a lot with Quaker parrots. Some of the conures, you even see it in macaws. And the different species seem to have different plucking patterns, how it starts out. But nevertheless, African gray parrots have been found to be at least 8 times more at risk of developing a feather plucking problem than other types of birds. And scientists have noticed that this is a condition that usually, becomes more hostile, and the bird tries to guard their space a lot more. African grays are that kind of parrot. That's their personality trait, a little bit more hostile, a little bit more territorial. And, we're not sure what the link is with that, but these birds do tend to have a little bit more cortisol in their droppings, according to the research. So they might be a little more high-strung to begin with. Now, compare that to cockatoos. Cockatoos are 13 times more likely to engage in feather plucking and or self-mutilation. And as a matter of fact, they're one of the most prolific, well-known pluckers that there are. It can develop into, a very severe problem where they're actually causing deep lacerations in their chest, on their legs, sometimes under their wings and that sort of thing. So feather plucking is often a sign that there's an underlying issue, and it's important to determine what's causing the disorder in the first place, because when you know what's causing it, then you can address the root cause of the problem. And so common causes of feather plucking are going to include things like different kinds of infections, nutritional factors, allergies, environmental factors, and behavioral factors. So let's talk about the first thing that Dr. Thielen talks about. She mentions that provide your bird with a healthy diet and how important it is to provide functional supplements. So functional supplements are natural plant-based products, if you will, things like red palm oil, organic sprouts that you can soak for a nutritional diet, herbs, vegetables, that sort of stuff. Different kinds of seeds that you can put on their chop. Because the more variety that you give your bird, the more vitamins and nutritional wellness it's going to experience. And a bird that feels well and has all its organs functioning in tip-top shape is less apt to develop a feather plucking disorder in the first place. So some of the most common disorders that Dr. Thielen talked about in her article, her journal article, were hypervitaminosis A, which is deficiency in vitamin A's. Vitamin A is very prevalent in things like red palm oil. A lot of leafy greens and many vegetables have vitamin A in it as well. But another thing that she talked about was hyperkeratosis, which is a common nutritional deficiency where keratin actually grows kind of in thick areas, and then it makes some organs not function as well as they should. So, low vitamin A is a very common problem, like I said, with birds that are on maybe a seed diet or eating too many nuts. That's why any avian vet that is well studied that you talk to is going to talk with you about feeding your bird about 60 to 70% of their diet being a nice organic pellet, bird pellet specifically made for parrots, and anywhere between 20% fruits, 10% nuts, fruits and veggies, 20% fruits and veggies, about 10% nuts, and things like essential fatty acids and that sort of stuff. So, just ensuring that your bird is getting those daily doses of those nutrients that sometimes tend to get cooked out of their pellets and stuff, that's going to be really important. So feather plucking can be a sign of underlying health issues too. A lot of times I'll get calls about, a bird maybe starting to pluck, especially in a little bit older age when they have been on these seed diets, start plucking in different areas. And that might be where that arthritis is developing, or, where some organ damage in the body is taking place. So providing them with a healthy diet and functional supplements is one thing that you can do to ensure their overall health and to prevent feather plucking. Now, the next thing that she talks about that you can do is to address common behavior problems. So there are a couple of things that she really hones in on. One is figure out what triggers anxiety in the first place. So you kind of do a time study with yourself and your bird in order to figure this out. A little story is that my little Timneh African gray started plucking his feathers out, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, his tail feathers. And when I sat down with myself and did a time study to figure out what happened right before the plucking episode, I was able to realize that he was not getting along well with my very territorial African gray parrot. And the African gray parrot was, the Congo, was actually beating up on little Timmy. And so that was what triggered Timmy's anxiety. And when I was able to pinpoint that, then I was able to eliminate that interaction in the first place. So literally, SMOKEY, the Congo, would stalk Timmy, not usually in front of me, but I had installed like a Ring camera, and I was able to see what was going on. And when I figured that out, then I just literally separated the two. I can't even actually have them in the same room. So for instance, I have a bird room where I keep SMOKEY and my Moluccan. And I just had to take Timmy out of there because, SMOKEY would just stalk him literally. Figuring out what those triggers are is really important. So the easiest way to do that, and I've got a blog post on this on birdsupplies.com. The easiest way to do that is to do what's called a simple time study. So as a behaviorist, I can tell you that what you do is you take you cut the day up, if you will, into kind of fourths. So I'm checking 4 times a day to see if there's been some feather plucking going on. What I'm looking for is there's some blood feathers, a lot more pulled out feathers, feather intact, shaft intact and all, just, on the floor, and they're not molting. And then I think back in time, okay, what occurred that could have caused this plucking? And, that's partly how I got to the situation with, Smokey being a stalker. It's not funny, but, that's kind of what he is. And so once you figure that out, then you can eliminate it. And behaviorists, as well as Dr. Thielen, tell us that is one of the most effective ways that you can curb plucking ever, is to figure out that anxiety trigger. The second thing that Dr. Thielen talks about is to address attention-seeking behaviors. So, for instance, animals, and parrots in particular, are very prone to crave attention and interaction from their owners. And, a lot of times us people, or us parents, think that, oh, I can reason with my bird, or I'll just talk them out of it, or I'll let them know I'm disappointed, or what have you. Well, that doesn't work with parrots, because that is attention. And when you provide them attention, which is what they're craving in the first place, most of them, unless they've been traumatized, then they're going to repeat that behavior over and over again. So you wouldn't believe the amount of phone calls that I get where people are, calling me to ask about feather plucking. We're talking about it, and the bird starts plucking because it's not getting attention while they're on the phone. And the person literally puts the phone down, goes and approaches the pet, gives it a bunch of attention, and the pet just got reinforced that, hey, if I want attention, all I got to do is start messing with my feathers. So if you address those attention-seeking behaviors, and make sure that you're addressing them properly. So, for instance, when my bird is doing something inappropriate, like stalking its cage mate, I might not want to provide it a bunch of attention for that. But when Smokey is doing something appropriate, and he's not a plucker, don't get me wrong, but he's not a plucker. But when he's doing something like, for instance, staying on his play stand, interacting with his toys, whistling, trying new foods, engaging in his environment, that kind of stuff. That's the stuff I want him to do more of. Those are called natural parrot behaviors. And so those are the behaviors I'm going to provide that much desired attention for. So keep that in mind. And this is called behavior modification or positive reinforcement. It's very effective in turning around problem behavior in just about any animal, but parrots in particular. Now, if you have a parrot that's been traumatized or extremely timid, oftentimes what those birds crave is non-attention from humans. And so you have to kind of approach their behavior in a reverse psychology sort of way. And that's much more than this video can actually cover, and it's in-depth stuff, and it's probably something that you would need coaching from a bird behaviorist like myself in order to really properly implement that. Now, the third thing that Dr. Thielen talks about is to address common environmental issues. So she names a couple of different things that are super important. For instance, did you know that birds that are out of their cage more than 8 hours a day are much less apt to pluck than birds that are in their cage for more than 8 hours a day? So there's a correlation, if you will, that the birds that are out exercising, interacting with people, playing and doing natural parrot behaviors are much more content and less anxious and less apt to engage in feather plucking. So try and get your bird out a lot more. I don't know that anybody that holds a full-time job could do the full 8 hours a day, but the more the better, keeping in mind that your bird does need adequate sleep as well. So that's an important statistic. There's another important thing that she mentioned in this journal article, and that is birds that have less than 4 hours of interaction and enrichment a day. And we're talking things like playing with toys, interacting with humans, foraging, having access to sensory activities such as, maybe bird TV for parrots or music playing in the background, that kind of stuff. Those birds that have less than 4 hours a day are much more prone to developing a feather plucking disorder. And so it's crucial that you provide your bird with a variety of toys. If they're, tree dwellers or anything like that, those puzzle style foraging toys. If they're a ground feeder like a cockatiel or some conures and stuff, you want to provide some like a parrot treasure chest, or maybe ground foraging type of toys for them. And these can help reduce that stress and anxiety, and they're just natural parrot behaviors, so they calm the parrot and promote a sense of security. So lastly, she talks about getting enough sleep. So we all know that parrots are from the equator regions. That's where the jungles are and the rainforests and stuff, a lot of them. And so their bodies are adapted to needing more sleep time. And I mean, when they're awake, they're fully active and have high metabolism, but boy, they need a lot of sleep. And so birds literally need 10 to 12 hours of sleep a night. And we find that the birds that do get that level of sleep are a lot less anxious and depressed. So just like you and me, I mean, I don't know about you, but if I get a poor night's sleep, especially a couple of nights in a row, I mean, I feel like crap, and I'm anxious, I'm irritable, and those are the very behaviors and moods that cause a parrot to start plucking in the first place. So, keep those environmental factors in mind when you're developing your parrot care routines. Now, the fourth thing that she talks about is, really reduce that reproductive behavior. So the bigger parrots tend to only go into hormone season in the wild just once or twice a year. But living in a domestic situation where the lights are on later at night, people are petting their birds, and cuddling them and all this stuff, and providing them with sleepy huts that simulate a nest, those are the kind of things that induce hormonal behaviors, unnatural hormonal behaviors. So instead of just going into a hormonal season once or twice a year, they're just chronically in hormone season. And these are the birds that you'll see they're chronically laying eggs, or like SMOKEY, my Congo African gray. He's always seeking out some kind of nesting cavity, whether it's under the couch or under my dresser or what have you. And, if I let him do that, he will become excessively hormonal. And then, boy, is he hard to be around, because he is a biter when he gets like that. And so I have to really keep a handle on his reproductive behavior. When you do that, basically you just get in yourself a routine of putting them to bed a little earlier, making sure they're getting that 10 to 12 hours of sleep a night. You remove toys that they might be masturbating on. Don't put in things like happy huts or things like that will make them think that you're, hey, providing a nest and that you want to have babies with this bird. It's not going to happen, so let's not torture them with it. And so, just rearrange their living space and that sort of stuff. The other thing to think about is, like I said, putting them to bed earlier and getting them up a little bit later. And if you don't have an area in the maybe the cage is in your living room or something, and the family has to get up and get ready to go to work and that sort of thing, consider getting a sleep cage. I mean, it's a simple solution. With a sleep cage is essentially a bird carrier that you use for them to sleep in, and you could put it in a dark room that doesn't have windows. Worst case scenario, I guess, would be a closet or something, but having them just get that extra sleep will really keep those reproductive behaviors in check. Now, finally, Dr. Thielen talks about providing adequate UVA and UVB lighting. So that's, sunlight if possible. So out here in my backyard, I've got a big old aviary, and I get my birds out as much as possible in the spring, winter, in the spring, summer, and fall. I have to adapt it a little bit in the summer. I can't put them out when it's 90. Dr. Scott Eccles talks about, if it's anywhere between 50 and 80, birds can be outside. I live in Colorado. We've got a lot of hawks here, and I don't want to be outside supervising them all the time. But as little as 15 minutes a day will do the trick to give them that UVA, UVB lighting. Now, what's the difference between UVA and UVB? So UVA is lighting that kind of stimulates or simulates, if you will, natural daylight. And it's been shown to improve mental health and well-being in birds. It helps the birds, it stimulates their appetite, and it helps them feel like engaging in normal parrot behaviors like preening normally more frequently. UVB lighting, on the other hand, is what's necessary to help the body produce that vitamin D. And vitamin D is such an essential nutrient that many birds are lacking in. It's not available in a whole heck of a lot of parrot-friendly foods, but it's essential for bone health. It's essential for calcium and magnesium metabolism. And without all of those nutrients, the brain kind of starts going haywire. The neurons are not firing correctly. that affects mood, makes the birds much more anxious. And so, you know, you're probably kind of realizing that all of 5 of these recommendations, these remedies that Dr. Thielen's talking about, actually work in sync with each other. And so, you know, just making sure that your bird has that as much UVA, UVB lighting without getting overheated or over chilled is going to be very important. If you can't provide them in an outdoor aviary, I mean, they are kind of expensive. But if you can't do that, you can take them out in a well-ventilated cage. You can get a bird harness and let them, you know, go with you whenever you're walking the dog or what have you. And then in the winter, of course, you know, I'm not going to want to walk my bird on a leash in the middle of a snowstorm or anything. But you can get some, you know, pretty effective bird lights for fairly affordable. Definitely a whole lot cheaper than a vet workup once they have started plucking. So just keeping your bird well to begin with, you know, reduces your chances that your bird will develop a feather plucking problem, and it greatly increases your chances that if a problem has developed, you can turn it around and have a better potential of, you know, having it grow beautiful feathers at its next molt. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Hey, I'd also love it if you'd subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm trying to put out at least one really detailed video a week, and I try to put out several shorts as much as possible. And so when you guys like my videos and stuff, then YouTube kind of gives me a little more juice and a little more exposure, and I'm able to educate people on how to keep their parrots well much more effectively. So again, hope you found it helpful. Let's post your notes and comments in the comments section and share this with your friends. So thanks a lot. We'll talk later. Bye-bye.